Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Zeus. So Zeus is a very interesting hero. He is pretty much only played mid. People have tried to play him support here and there, but it just doesn't really work. So we're just going to focus on the mid version of Zeus. So how do you think of Zeus? Well, Zeus is basically the magic damage version of Sniper, or you could say Sniper is the physical damage version of Zeus. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically what Zeus wants to do is he wants to sit in the back, not get initiated on in team fights. He just wants to sit in the very, very back and cast all of his spells, spam his spells, and then he does insane magic damage. In fact, I would say he probably does more damage than any other hero in the game, actually. Even though he does magic damage, which usually doesn't scale very well, his abilities actually scale pretty well into the later portion of the game. He actually does percentage-based damage because of one of his skills, and so because of that, he actually is really, really good against tanky heroes, and he scales extremely well. So he just wants to sit in the back, use a bunch of his mana, spam his spells because they're relatively low cooldown, and I would say that, most games when you're playing a core mid Zeus and you win the game, you probably have the highest damage out of anybody in the game. That's just kind of what happens. And so if you take like the entirety of Dota 2, I would bet that Zeus is the hero that has the most damage, like cumulatively, in all games, just because this hero is insane and does the most damage out of any hero in the game. So that's how you can think about Zeus. That's why he's really strong. And I think in the lower MMRs, the lower you go, the easier it is to play Zeus and the more impact he can have, because his weakness is essentially the same as Sniper. He wants to sit in the back, he has low mobility, but if he gets jumped on by a Storm Spirit or any kind of Spirit hero, by any hero that has a Blink or likes to buy Blink Dagger, it can feel really bad because he has low mobility. He doesn't really love buying Force Staff, Yules, BKB, anything like that, because he really just wants to buy offensive items so he can output more damage. So buying anything defensive really feels bad. You don't really want to do that. And so in lower MMRs, people are coordinated. They're not going to focus Zeus. They're not going to do the right thing, make the right play. And at higher MMRs, they're going to increasingly do that. Even in my MMR, Zeus can be pretty viable. But like into the Immortal bracket and Pro bracket, that's why you don't see very much Zeus. Because if you just jump him and you just kill him really quick in the team fight, that's a lot of your team's damage. So that's basically Zeus's weakness. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that Zeus likes to have other heroes on his team that like to go in. The tanky initiation type of heroes that just want to frontline, want to jump in, want to brawl, so that they can kind of distract everybody and he can just sit in the back and cast all of his spells. But if you have a bunch of heroes that like to sit back, Zeus can feel pretty bad because then he's just another hero that's sitting back and everybody's going to jump on him first and kill him because he's a pretty easy target to kill. So that's how to think of Zeus. That's kind of Zeus in a nutshell. Now let's take a look at Zeus's abilities and see how they work. Now that we understand Zeus in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that high damage, magic damage output hero like I talked about. So first we're going to take a look at Arc Lightning. This is a pretty simple and straightforward skill. It's a magic damage skill that you just click on a hero or a creep and it shocks them, and it actually just jumps to nearby creeps or heroes as well. So we can show you here on the creep wave. I shock the one, it jumps across to these other ones as well. Now this ability is really, really low cooldown, as you can see, and does a decent amount of damage. And the main way that you use this ability is to secure last hits in lane, to push waves, and to harass the enemy in the lane as well. So it's your main laning spell. Occasionally you will be skilling, Arc Lightning, or Lightning Bolt. The next one you might max that in some matchups, just depending. But a lot of times you put a lot of points in Arc Lightning so you can push out waves, so you can farm, so you can secure last hits and all of those kinds of things. And then later on in the game, obviously, in a team fight, because it does have such a low cooldown, you can spam this. When you don't have your Lightning Bolt, your other damage spell up, you can spam your Arc Lightning just to do a little bit of extra damage. And it's really, really good to clear waves with this hero. Obviously, we see a full creep wave here. I can pretty much just spam it a few times, and the wave is pretty much dead after only like 3 times of spamming it. So it's a really, really good way to get farms, secure last hits, all those things like I said. So that's Arc Lightning. Next, we're going to take a look at Lightning Bolt, and this ability is probably, I would say, one of the highest damage output abilities, if not the highest damage ability in the game. And that's not just because this ability is a lot of damage. It only does 350 damage. That's not like a ton of damage. That's not more than like Laguna Blade or Finger of Death or anything like that. But the fact is this has a 6-second cooldown. It's such a low cooldown. And when you combine it with the static field, which we'll talk about in a second, it does so much damage. This is mainly the way, or one of the ways, that Zeus can do so much damage in team fights, in the game, all of those kinds of things. So basically what this does is you just click it, and then you click it on an enemy or a creep, and it just does damage to that player or that creep, whatever it is, that unit. So we can see here, we'll cast it on Axe, it does some damage. You see how much damage it does there, and that's obviously because of the static field, which we'll talk about in a second. But this ability doesn't just do damage, it does some other things. So first, it has a little bit of an ability where you basically don't have to cast it right on the enemy, you can cast it close to them. So you see I clicked it right there, and it cast Lightning Bolt on the closest enemy. Same thing with creeps. I actually just cast that one there, but here we'll do it right next to that creep, and there, it hit the creep right next to it. So basically, the reason why that's important is because this ability can be cast in fog, like up hills or in trees or anything like that, to hit people even if you don't see them. So that's very important. So you can do a lot of damage in that way. Now, the other thing it does is it actually reveals and gives vision. So we see we have no vision here in the trees. I can use my lightning bolt, and look at the amount of vision we get there. That's a crazy amount of vision that we get up on the high ground there. So not only does it give vision just in general where you don't have it because of the fog of war, but it also reveals invisible units. So we see Axe here has Shadow Blade. I press that real quick. I don't see Axe anymore, but I cast the lightning bolt, and there we go. Now I see Axe, and it also does damage because I generally kind of knew where he was. So, you know, we have Axe. We have Axe in Shadow Blade form. Let's say Axe Shadow Blades and runs this way. I don't see him anymore, but I can basically cast this over there, and I say, okay, there he is, now he's revealed. So it's a pretty good way to reveal, you know, places that you can't see, reveal invisible units. It also reveals wards. You can de-ward really effectively on high grounds and all of those kinds of things. It's just a very good, versatile spell. And then the reason why this spell, and even Arc Lightning, does so much damage, as we can see when I cast it there on Axe, is because of this next passive ability, Static Field. So Static Field, it's actually really simple. It just does percentage-based damage as health reduction. You see right there, health reduction at max level 10%. This just means that all of his magic damage, all of the abilities that he uses are scaling into the late game really good and very effective against tanky heroes. So look at how much damage it does there to Axe based on the HP that he has. Let's give Axe a bunch of Hearts of Tarask and see how much damage his spells still do. So we'll just like put, you know, 5 hearts there, and watch this. It still does a significant amount of damage. That's a ton of damage. Now obviously he's regenning a lot, but like look at how much damage I'm doing there. When he has 7,000 HP and I'm doing a ton of damage. Like, that's a significant amount of damage that you can actually see. And this isn't even with any items that you buff up the damage or anything like that. And that's just one lightning bolt. And then obviously we cast your arc lightning there. So that's, I think, a good representation of why this can scale and why Zeus can scale into the late game with his magic damage, because other heroes, you know, the magic damage, it falls off, it doesn't scale very well. That's why you usually have a carry that can right-click and buys right-click items. Zeus is unique in that way because Zeus can scale with his magic damage because of this static field ability. So that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple there, just allows him to do a ton of damage. Now, lastly, we have Thunder God's Wrath. This is pretty simple as well. It kind of is a combination of lightning bolt, but like a global lightning bolt. So what you do is you just click it, and it basically does damage to every hero on the enemy team in the game, and it reveals them. So we see there, I can't see Axe while I cast it. It does damage to Axe and also reveals him. So this is great for scouting out Roche or anything like that, scouting out ganks and things like that, where the enemy is if you really need the information. It has a decent cooldown, so you don't just always want to do that for information, but it's also really good for obviously doing a ton of damage in team fights. Or if you're mid, you finally hit 6, there's someone on the side lanes that's really low, you can always click this and just like steal kills from all the way across the map, because it is a global ability. So it's really, really good, very high damage output. Obviously does damage to every single player on the enemy team in the game, and is great for vision, all of those kinds of things. So it's just a really, really good ability overall. So those are all of his abilities, but I am going to mention his Ags and probably his Shard very briefly, because they are important for the hero in terms of how the hero works, especially the Ags, because you're going to buy Ags pretty much every single game. So what Ags does is it creates a Nimbus, and what the Nimbus is basically an AoE where this little like debuff appears. It's the, you know, Nimbus cloud or whatever you want to say, and basically it's on a small timer, it shocks people with lightning bolt. With your lightning bolt in the AoE. So it has a certain amount of time that it lasts, and every so often it goes off and it shocks the closest unit to the center there with that lightning bolt. I believe it's the closest unit. Creates this cloud storm on the map on the nearby enemies. I think it might be random, but it's probably the closest unit. I believe it's the closest unit if I recall correctly. But yeah, so you see that. Now the enemy can destroy that. So it is something that's clickable by the enemy. So they can right-click it and destroy it quickly. So you do need to kind of understand that you want to cast it almost on supports or other things like that. It also gives vision as well, like Lightning Bolt does, and all those things. You can even push it from side lanes, so it is global castable, like your ultimate and things like that. So you can cast it kind of from anywhere. So it's just an extra, global ability that does a ton of damage. If you get like if you get Refresher and Ags, you just have 2 of these and 2 ults and a bunch of lightning bolts. Dude, this hero does insane damage. Now, lastly, I'll take a look at the Ags Shard. This is just a good mobility spell. Basically, it makes your static field an ability that you can actually press. You press E and you basically jump. It's just like a little Mario hop, basically. And so you can actually, get over cliffs and things like that. You have a small bit of mobility, and it also zaps people nearby as well, so it does a little bit of damage there. But it's just a little bit of an extra thing because you usually don't want to buy mobility on this hero if you don't have to, because you want to get Ags. Maybe you'll get a Blink, but you want to get Ags and other things like that that allow you to have cast range, extra damage, all of that kind of stuff. So that's Zeus. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. So now we're jumping into a replay here of Mason playing mid Zeus, and it was actually hard to kind of find a pro level, like a high top 100 rank Zeus mid game. But he actually played Zeus mid here, and they won this game. And this is the perfect example of how to play Zeus mid. It's actually not very difficult. That's one thing about this hero and why I recommend it for newer players, because it's fairly simple, fairly easy. You pretty much always start with your last hit securing ability, Arc Lightning here. You also want to make sure you're probably buying like a Tango, maybe an Iron Branch and a Mantle of Intelligence, something like this, maybe a Fairy Fire if you think you need it instead of this extra branch, something like that, just because you want to always be ensuring that you're getting your bottle before that 2-minute mark when that rune spawns, because it's so important, especially this patch, that you get your bottle, because the main way that this hero last hits and sustains in lane is through bottle charges and those kinds of things, and with mana. So he doesn't just right-click to get last hits, he also uses mana, as I described earlier. Now, I will say that over the years, over the last like few patches or whatever, this hero has been buffed a lot, like his movement speed, his attack animation, his attack damage, and things like that, so you don't need to constantly be spamming your spells to get every single last hit like you may be used to in the past. So he has decent damage. You see, he has 67 damage there. He has 4 armor. His movement speed isn't that bad, so you can use your right-click to secure last hits if you're against a hero that doesn't have the best damage or animation. Like Wind Ranger only has 55 damage here, not the best animation, so you see how he's not using his spells constantly to get every single last hit. He's really only using them to kind of get the ranged last hits, or the last hits he feels like he can't walk up and get. All of those kinds of things. So that, I think, is a good example of how to play Zeus, especially in these patches now where he has decent right-click damage, and he's not just this spell-casting hero like he maybe used to be. So you see how he can even be kind of aggressive on this Wind Ranger and almost gets her all the way down to kill range because of his spells, and because, now he has his bottle, he has more mana and all of that kind of stuff. So it is a hero that you can secure kills and can dominate lanes with, but it's one of those heroes that even if you don't dominate the lane, you pretty much will always be able to secure CS because of your Q ability. So I think that's just a good example of how to play this hero in the lane. And it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple from there, because at this point he has his bottle. Just secure last hits. Maybe fly yourself a few mangoes. I think he actually flies himself some mangoes here in a second. Let's just look back here. I think this has mangoes. Yeah, a couple mangoes. I would say don't use a ton of mangoes. Like, you don't want to be flying yourself so much that you're not able to get your boots. You're not able to get, your timing, because you probably want to buy mana boots or something on this hero, maybe boots of travel, whatever it is, and you do want to get those item timings up because they are very important. So you don't want to be wasting too much money on mangoes, but you want to have enough mana to sustain in the lane, to farm, all of those kinds of things. And these days, especially with your bottle, you're going to be getting so much regen with all these bottle charges and stuff that you should be you should have no problem laning with your mana and those kinds of things. So that is honestly just how you play Zeus in the lane. It's very straightforward, very simple. Use right clicks when you can. Use your Q to secure last hits. Maybe harass a little bit. You see he's going for static field. I would say, yeah, this is kind of like debatable whether you should do this or not with or skilling Lightning Bolt and maxing this eventually. But regardless, you know, follow the guides, those kinds of things. And eventually you'll just come online, you'll do a decent amount of damage. Once you get 6, you can even use your Thunder God's Wrath to secure kills in the side lanes without even having to leave mid. So that's pretty much the laning stage with Zeus. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think it's really, really good for new players because of that, because he is a pretty easy laning hero. Now the next thing I want to show you is actually what not to do on Zeus, or why I think Zeus is actually a good hero for newer players to try. So you see that how aggressive Mason gets, and then he actually just feeds. Now you can laugh, you know, be like, what are you doing? He like walks into tower range and all that kind of stuff. It was a huge mistake. But we can go back here, and we can see why Zeus is such a kind of dangerous hero to play, a hard hero to play with positioning and those kinds of things, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're vulnerable to die like he did right there. You see how easy it was once the enemy Wind Ranger hit 6 to just dive him and kill him straight up. Like, it really wasn't hard at all. There was nothing he needed to do. He put himself in a terrible position and he died. And although that's, you know, high-level Dota, like, obviously that's going to happen. I'm bored to no end. He's just, like, making an excuse. Classic Mason. But focusing on, you know, why that's good to show you guys is because I think that Zeus is a good hero to learn for newer players, because it's very, very important to know positioning on this hero. Like, positioning is one of the most important things on this hero, in the sense that if you're not positioning yourself correctly in team fights, later in the lane, once people have threat on you, then you're just going to feed. And so that's one of the biggest parts of learning Dota, is learning how not to feed on a hero that has no mobility. And so Zeus is a very, very good way to learn that by playing him, because he has a lot of impact, but you just can't feed. And if you put yourself in bad positions, you're going to feed like he did just there. Now, I did just want to briefly show you this gank. Now, this is something that you can do with Zeus, despite the fact that Zeus isn't a very good ganking hero in the way that you would typically think, because he obviously doesn't have any mobility. He is very, very good at helping out the side lanes once he hits 6 in just this way, because he does so much damage. He does more damage than you really would expect at this early in the game. 6 minutes in, 5 minutes in, he does insane damage to side lanes. So if you can TP to a side lane, you feel like you can't go mid because, you know, there's a Timbersaw there. I just played a game of Zeus against Timbersaw where I was Zeus and the Timbersaw was just like dominating me after a while because I couldn't do anything because I had no mobility. So I just went to the side lanes. Same thing here. He knows if he goes mid, the Wind Ranger is just going to ult him. He's going to die. So he goes to the side lanes and helps there because he does so much damage. So that's basically what you can do with Zeus. And then at this point, you're kind of transitioning to pushing out the lanes wherever you feel safe, ganking if you can, maybe farming a jungle camp or two like we're seeing right here. And that's basically the concept of Zeus at this point. Farming, pushing out the lane, and helping gank and doing a ton of damage in the side lanes. And that's how you kind of transition mid-game with Zeus. Now, next I want to show you, this is about 10 minutes in the game. There's a fight top happening, but he can have a lot of impact without actually even being there. And this is kind of just how Zeus works with being a global hero. You see, he looks at the fight, he presses ult immediately, not only to do damage to every hero, but also to give vision for his team, because they're probably engaged in a fight that they don't want to be in because the whole team is going up there, the whole enemy team. So that is a good way to use Zeus as well. Obviously, he doesn't want to go up there because there's mobility on the enemy that would probably kill him, so it's not something where he really wants to join at this point. But it's just a good example of how to use his ult to either give vision or help his team out. Now, it didn't work out the best. They're not doing that well. This game goes really late and they end up winning. But the other thing I wanted to mention about the ultimate and about when you want to use it in general is that you kind of do want to use it in circumstances like that to give vision at the start of a team fight, those kinds of things, and not at the end of a team fight to steal kills. And the reason why you want to do that is because this ability, Static Field, does health reduction based on current health. And so the more health that the enemy has, the more damage you're actually going to be doing with Thunder God's Wrath. And so it's very, very good to give a lot of vision at the beginning of a fight to let, you know, your allies know where everybody is. And then you're also doing extra damage at the beginning when everybody has more health. So just keep that in mind when you're using Thunder God's Wrath. But that's kind of a good way to show how Zeus can at least be useful and get involved, even if he doesn't want to be, you know, right in everyone's face or join a side lane gank at about 10 to 12 minutes. Now, I'm jumping into a quick game that I played recently as Zeus, and I was against a Timbersaw mid. I had a horrible start. Obviously, it's very, very hard to play against a Timbersaw. He just gets levels, and then all of a sudden he rolls over you. So thankfully, I was able to rotate a little bit and help. But mainly what I wanted to show you in this game was, even though I had a bad start and everything, we kind of came back. We did end up winning, and it's largely because we played as a team, we fought as a team, and this is the perfect example of how to fight as a team, especially with Zeus. So basically, I have a lot of heroes that like to go in. I try to kind of stick on the outskirts of the fight. I don't want to be the one initiated on. I don't want to be the one focused down. You see, I'm kind of playing far away from the heroes that try to threaten me, but they still try to go on me. You see, the Timbersaw still tries to, throw his chakram at me. The Pudge still tries to chase me down and hook me because they know if they don't kill me, I'm going to be doing a ton of damage in the fight. You see, I did a bunch of damage to the Drow to start off the fight. She had to run away. I did a ton of damage to the SK when he initiated in, and my Mars was able to blow him up. And I think that's just a perfect example of how to play a team fight, kind of mid-game, even to the later portion of the game. You want to be kind of close enough that you can do a lot of damage, but you don't want to be so close that you can get initiated on. You want to try to run away on the outskirts of the fight, and sometimes it's actually more beneficial for you to run away and not use spells than it is to die, because a lot of times, like we saw with the Pudge there, like we saw with the Timbersaw, they kind of tried to go in to kill me, and I just kind of ran away, was juking them, and so they wasted time and spells to try to kill me. They failed, and then my team was able to turn on them. I was able to turn on them and kill them because they were out of position by trying to go on me. So that's how you want to play Zeus in team fights. You want to sit in the back, cast your spells, kind of play this fine line, and then sometimes you just want to focus on getting out to run away, to kite people, because the enemy's just going to waste resources to try to hunt you down because they know that if they don't kill you, you're just going to win the fight by doing a ton of damage. So that's pretty much how to play Zeus in team fights. Now we're back to the Mason game, and the last thing that I want to show you is just how good of a defender of high ground Zeus is. So we see there's 3 dead on the enemy. We see that he could easily get jumped by these heroes, but because of his damage with his spells and everything, and obviously the Pango helps too, it's just so hard for the enemy to push high ground. You see the Wind Ranger has to basically back off immediately or he's going to die. Even the Anti-Mage, who has all of these items, look at these items that he has. He even has he's level 30, so he has plus 20% counterspell magic resistance, and it's still so hard for them to push high ground against Zeus because of all of his abilities. So it's just one of these heroes that it's like a Tinker or something else. It can be just so annoying to push high ground. And imagine if they didn't have an anti-mage on the enemy team who could just, jump in and potentially blow this Zeus up. Like, if they didn't have anti-mage, it would be even harder, because look at how little damage he's doing to the anti-mage, but it's still enough to just make it so hard to do anything pushing high ground. And the anti-mage still getting low, all this kind of stuff. I think it's just a great example of how Zeus can really stall out the game, and why I think Zeus is very good in lower MMRs for people trying to learn the game as well, because it's very easy to defend high ground and kind of come back in games that you otherwise should have lost, because, this is a high-level Dota game, and they can't even push high ground when the Spectre was dead for like 100-some seconds, like 2 minutes basically, and that's their main, right-click carry, and the Pango even died, and they still couldn't push high ground in a high-level Dota, right? And imagine you're in, Herald, Guardian, Crusader, whatever it is, you're going to be able to defend high ground like this, and the enemy is definitely going to overextend and throw, as long as you put yourself in the right position. You saw how he was kind of playing really far back the whole time, being super careful not to die, because if he died, they could easily take the high ground, but with him there, it's so hard. So I think that's a perfect example of how Zeus can really stall the game out, be a great high ground defender, and it's, I think, really good for lower MMR players or new players to the game to learn how to play Dota in general by trying out Zeus and getting good at Zeus. So that is my Zeus guide, everybody. I hope that was informative for you, and I hope it helps you. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. All of the links are below for my Discord. Go ahead and join that if you want to. Request replays there. I do replay reviews every Friday on Twitch. Twitch is below as well. If you want to support me in general, you can go to my Patreon, or if you want coaching, you can go to my Patreon as well. We have the coaching subscription as well as the $5 a month subscription, just to help me so I can keep making this content. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.